Okay, welcome to the second full video. I'm going to start numbering them. This is the second, that was the first. The introductory video is going to be zero. So welcome to the second full video of Introduction to Philosophy, great philosophers. In the last video, we discussed the Socratic method or dialectic, the method that we see Socrates employing in Plato's dialogues, questioning people in order to figure out whether they have wisdom or not. And that's sort of general. That's going to hold for all of Plato's dialogues. But now we're turning to the Euthyphro in particular. And so by now you should have read the Euthyphro before listening to this video. And I'm going to be asking you questions that have to do with the dialogue. So during this video. So please, if you haven't read it, pause the video now, go read the dialogue, come back. So let's turn now to the Euthyphro itself. So Euthyphro is charging his father with murdering a slave. It isn't clear from the dialogue whether Plato thinks Euthyphro is right to charge his father for murdering a slave, but what is clear is that even if Euthyphro is right, his confidence is misplaced. So in this video, I'm going to be asking you a series of questions. The first question I want to ask you is, what do you take the central question of the dialogue to be? And when I ask you these questions, I'll pause for a while, and I hope that you'll pause the video and think about the question. And then once you have an answer firmly in mind, you'll press play again. So the first question I want to ask you is, what is the central question of the dialogue, of the Euthyphro? Well, if you said, what is piety or holiness, you would be right. So the Greek word that's being translated here is hosion. And hosion can be translated either piety or holiness. In some contexts, it works better with piety. In other contexts, it works better with holiness. So I'm going to use the two interchangeably. Our translator has used the translation piety, but it really means both things. I mean, it really, in different contexts, the word can be used to mean what we would mean by piety. In other contexts, it can be used to mean what we would mean by holiness. So this question, what is piety or holiness? This is a classic question, classic topic for a Socratic dialogue. So most of Plato's dialogues try to answer a question with this structure. What is piety? What is holiness? What is F, right? Where F is a form or a feature. We'll talk more about that when we get to the next dialogue, the Phaedo. So we're not going to dwell on that for now. But you can think of it as, what is piety, or what is justice, or what is beauty, or what is virtue, or what is knowledge, right? So he's trying to figure out what something really is, what its nature is. Justice, beauty, knowledge, whatever, right? So that's a classic question of a Socratic dialogue. What is blah? Right. Okay. So how does Euthyphro first respond to this question? What do you think? How does Euthyphro first respond to this question? Well, his first response comes at 5D. Let's see, why is this not working? Comes at 5D. And what he says is, in answer to the question, what is piety? What I'm doing right now, and other things like this. Right. So here Euthyphro is giving examples right? Oh, it's this kind of thing. It's prosecuting my father for murdering this slave, right? So Euthyphro seems to take Socrates to be asking for examples. But is Socrates asking for examples? What is Socrates really after? What do you think? Well, Socrates asks, what is the pious and what the impious, right? So that's also at 5D. And what he really wants to know, right, is he wants a definition. He wants to know, he's looking for, he's asking, what is the one thing that makes things holy and the lack of which makes them unholy, right? So, so what he wants is really a definition. You know, the thing that makes things holy. And so what he's looking for is something of the structure F is X, right? Piety is, or holiness is law, not something of the form X is F, right? This is piety. I mean, that's what Euthyphro is giving him. Euthyphro is giving him examples that are of the form X is pious, but what Socrates really wants as an answer to his question is something like piety is blah, 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 right? So, okay, so once Euthyphro gets that this is what Socrates is after, what's Euthyphro's first proposal? What do you think? Well, at 7a, Euthyphro says, well, holiness or piety is what's dear to or loved by the gods, and unholiness, what's hated by them. So that's the first proposal, right? Piety is what's dear to the gods, or loved by the gods. Socrates then tests and examines this proposal without bringing in his own thoughts on what holiness consists in, right? He starts asking Euthyphro a series of questions, and he uncovers a problem. What's the problem? So let's write, what's the problem? So the first thing is piety. So what's the first problem? Well, the problem is that there are going to be some things that are going to be both pious and unpious, because different gods love different things, right? So if Poseidon loves the ocean, but Prometheus hates the ocean and loves fire, well, then the ocean is going to be both pious and unpious, because Poseidon loves it, but Prometheus hates it, right? And so because different gods love different things, some things are going to turn out to be both pious and unpious, right? And that's a problem, right? So so the problem is some things. So how can we see the Socratic method at work here? What do you think? How can we see the Socratic method at work here? Well, what's in the Socratic method? What does the Socratic method involve? Well, if you remember, it involves a questioner, an answerer. The answerer poses a thesis, a claim, makes a claim, and then the questioner asks a series of questions and tries to get the answer to contradict himself or herself. And so who's the questioner? Who's the answerer? What's the thesis? Well, in this case, the answer is going to be Euthyphro, right? He's putting forward a thesis. Piety is what's dear to the gods. And the questioner is going to be Socrates, right? Socrates asks a series of questions. And what's the contradiction? What's the contradiction that Euthyphro finds himself in? Well, it's that some things are going to be pious and unpious, right? So the ocean is going to be pious and it's going to be unpious. So the ocean will be X and not X, right? And if you remember from last time, we find ourselves in contradiction when we believe something that both is one way and cannot be that way, right? Like it's both that way and not that way, and that's a contradiction. Something can't both be one way and not that way at the same time. The table can't both be brown and not brown at the same place at the same time, right? And so what we've seen here is that Euthyphro has contradicted himself, right? And the contradiction is he takes the ocean to both be pious and not pious because it's loved by Poseidon and hated by Prometheus. So what is Socrates then propose to solve the problem? What does Socrates then propose to solve the problem? Let me write down. Socrates proposes that what is pious is what's loved by all the gods, right? So, what is pious? Right. And it's going to turn out that there are still problems with this, but at least this thesis isn't obviously contradictory, right? If we narrow down the pious things we're paying attention to what's loved by all the gods, well, then at least that stands a chance. And it's in examining why this thesis isn't going to work that we really get to the heart of the dialogue. And it's that we're going to turn to in the next video. Let me just write here. Let's see, how can we see the Socratic method at work here? Socrates is the questioner. Euthyphro. Euthyphro is the answer, and he contradicts himself. Okay. All right. I will see you in the next video, where we will turn to the heart of the dialogue, the fundamental part of the whole thing. Okay. See you then.